Hello, I'm Natasha Hussein, and this is Newsfeed, your dose of what people are talking about online. It's a record election year. At least 64 countries go to the polls in 2024. That's more than 1 billion people globally voting in elections this year. And alarmingly, we're seeing online manipulation go into hyperdrive with sophisticated AI deepfakes, doctored videos and images, targeted email chains, and texts. Concerned about how manipulated content could skew elections, experts are sounding the alarm over deepfakes like this.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
America, you blame me for interfering with your democracy, but I don't have to. You are doing it to yourself. Polling stations are closing. You don't know who to trust. You are divided.
Listen up, Millennials. Gen Z liberals, such a bunch of snowflakes. This Trump ASMR should make you young people feel nice and calm. So relaxed that you sleep right through election day.
Have I ever told you the story of the magical pistachio? I got lost in the grocery store and couldn't find my way out. But that's when I saw it, a glowing pistachio. Reality is I can't step down and let who? Kamala run? Have you seen her as Veep? Get the out of here. If you can't tell this is an AI-generated voice, then lots of luck in your senior year. Whatever the that means.
Okay, the swearing and magical pistachio gave it away for me. But while those AI deepfakes were pretty easy to clock, the reality is for many online, it's hard to discern between real and fake. And to unpack how detrimental deepfakes and manipulated images are during this big election year, I spoke to Adam Hadley. He's the founder of Tech Against Terrorism, a UN-backed initiative fighting harmful content online. Now, how dangerous is this deluge of AI-generated content in terms of undermining elections?
It's very significant and grave indeed. Certainly without the advent of generative AI, we would be concerned about democracies and the way in which democracies are interacting with social media. But with generative AI, providing sophisticated technology to the fingertips of many billions of people, we are concerned because generative AI makes it very easy to create material, videos, imagery, and text, and to create fake material. Fundamentally, quite a few of the major tech platforms simply aren't set up at present to cope with this deluge.
It's also at a very, very scary level nowadays. Now, 10 years ago, there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And today, because of algorithms and how pervasive social media is, it's at a level where things created by generative AI can move at a scale and speed never seen before.
Yes, the volume of material that can be created is significant, and the speed at which it can be created as well. At Tech Against Terrorism, we largely focus on disrupting the terrorist use of the internet. And unfortunately, we're already seeing the adoption of generative AI by designated terrorists in creating magazines, imagery, videos at speed, and in ways in which they're able to respond to audience demand and interaction. So because of the increased speed of creation of material that generative AI provides, that kind of creates a feedback loop that makes it possible for sophisticated actors, nation states, and terrorist organizations to sort of fine-tune the content so that it can be amplified.
We're seeing AI now at such a sophisticated level, you can barely tell the difference. I've seen clips of Putin, of Biden, and it really, really looks quite real. They're able to dupe and fool people online and potentially skew elections in a massive way.
Well, yes, and this technology isn't just available for university academics and researchers. It's available for anyone to use. And the point that we're stressing here is that it's not just about detecting this material, but also working with those companies developing the technology to ensure that there's a good standard of ethics being applied. Because in many cases, people can use mainstream technology to create material without many guide rails in place. Secondly, what's required more than before is capacity building, ensuring that our citizens are aware of how to check for this material, because within months, and as you were saying, even now, in many cases, it's almost impossible to detect whether something is fake or real. So it has to come down to where is this material being produced and what are the guide rails there. And in terms of the audience, just how skeptical is the audience? How questioning is the audience?
Meta decided against removing a fake clip of Biden because it didn't violate its manipulated media policies. Now, would you say Meta's policies need some major updating, I think this is a bit problematic.
Yeah, there's a fundamental challenge here that if we're saying that fake content is going to become impossible to detect because it's going to become so ubiquitous and the quality of this is going to become so high, I think we have to be careful about the idea that we need to remove all of this material. And certainly if it's possible for users and the community to label this material, that might be an effective way to kind of crowdsource this, because ultimately I think it's going to be very hard to remove all of this material because it's going to be very difficult to determine whether it's fake or not. So it has to be, I think, focused on the community identifying material and there being measures in place, almost assuming that material is fake in the first place, and then working backwards from there. What we're seeing is that some platforms have devised a policy that bans all forms of fake content, and that's certainly laudable if it's possible to enforce this at scale, which probably within a few months is going to be difficult to do because of the sophistication of technologies used to create this material.
Okay, as an ordinary user online, what should they be looking out for in terms of being able to weed out what content is harmful, what is disinformation?
Well, it has to be about triangulating with other information sources. Is something credible? Does it back up what we're seeing in legitimate media on the news or in newspapers? So really it comes down to those critical skills that are increasingly needed from all of us, because we can't believe what we see on the internet.
And in terms of that, how much content are we seeing online trying to manipulate the narrative in terms of the Gaza conflict and also upcoming elections? How much of this content is actually created by generative AI tools from what you're seeing?
Well, in a sense, the Gaza conflict is the first conflict where generative AI has been a significant part of this. And what we've seen is that a number of major terrorist organizations have been experimenting with the use of generative AI to produce material, posters, magazines and videos. So we're already beginning to see this. But what we're also seeing is that terrorists are building their own chatbots, are building their own technology to encourage kind of radicalization, and that's of grave concern.
Thank you, Adam, so much for this insight today and coming on Newsfeed.
Thank you.
The rise in misinformation is also fueled by a shift in how we consume content nowadays. Information now is just a tap away. People can access news, gossip, and whatever information they desire in mere seconds, but may not necessarily have the skills to fact check. Traditional media platforms have been in decline for years and are fighting to stay relevant as digital media creators rack up millions of views and followers. Zare delves deeper into the media war between traditional and digital outlets.
From the early days of the printing press to today's internet, journalism has adapted along with the technology to get the news out, and quick. Another such change is looming, and it's not the rise of social media, because many social media algorithms are now limiting the spread of news stories. Nearly 60% of US adults choose to get their news on mobile devices, while roughly 30% prefer TV. Even fewer go out of their way to pick up a newspaper. Legacy media is rising to the challenge, updating their reporting to fit in with today's trends. Reuters says around half of news publishers now regularly post on TikTok. Yet, behind the scenes, the journalism industry is bleeding jobs.
The entire journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with.
Just like Lorenz, some journalists are building their own following independently, but not everyone manages to stand out. And young people are increasingly turning to their peers and influencers for news. Millions are following content creators who cut the jargon and explain what's happening in simplest terms.
It's Friday night, and here's what happened.
Over 40% of users follow mainstream outlets on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. This number reaches 55% when it comes to X, formerly Twitter, a platform that used to be the go-to site for real-time news discussions. Meanwhile, TikTok is #1 for influencers delivering information, followed closely by Instagram, X, and YouTube. What was once seen as the new alternative to traditional media is also changing rapidly. Social media platforms are changing their algorithms to limit political and news content, ditching fact-checking and content moderation policies, meaning the old is becoming the new again. Users are turning to search engines and digital outlets to get reliable information. But the internet is not what it used to be. The arrival of large language models has drastically changed online content. Articles written by AI top search results, and news outlets are paywalling their sites altogether to avoid their work being used to train chatbots.
There's a real unanswered question of what's going to happen to news and publishing sites who have been previously incentivized to create content in exchange for traffic from systems like Google, when now you can have a ChatGPT style system that just generates the response right there, no traffic to the original source.
When users looking for information turn to the new AI-powered search engines, their results will be a summary of what's out there. But beware of the so-called facts. Artificial intelligence still hallucinates often and can't fact-check like a journalist. In this era of digital upheaval, separating fact from fiction is essential to a healthy flow of information, and how the news industry adapts to its present challenges will shape the future, hopefully to a more engaged and informed society.
Is the millennium bug back? Well, in some form, because Y2K trends have creeped back into our lives and made a huge comeback this year. And it's not just a fashion aesthetic. Think tech, but from a simpler time.
There's a lot of boredom right now with 2010s millennial minimalism and its total control over mainstream tech, which is best represented by Apple. And as a result, there's this growing vintage tech nostalgia, seen in mood boards of colorful late 90s iMacs, phone cases that make your iPhone look like a 2000s Razr flip phone, phone charms, and wired headphones. So I think we'll see some of that vaporwave vibe come back with the return of Tumblr culture, and also probably some more colorful tech coming out. I also think people are going to start using iPods again. I'm sure a lot of people do, but I think it's going to be like a style-driven choice now.
First, Gen Zers brought back flip phones. Why? Well, just for that undeniably satisfying feeling after ending a call with a snap of the phone. Then they rediscovered the joy of film photography. Well, there's certainly something about the process of loading a roll of film, carefully composing one shot, and then waiting anxiously to see the results. You just can't replicate that with a camera phone. While other generations describe them as tech addicts, it turns out surprisingly that Gen Z prefers to pick up a physical book over an e-book. In fact, paperback book sales have boomed quite remarkably in the past 2 years, all thanks to social media trends like the hashtag BookTok. Last year, vinyl records outsold CDs in the US for the first time in decades, and physical copies of music are increasingly performing better than digital downloads. Perhaps it's a desire to slow down and disconnect from the constant barrage of digital media, or maybe it's a longing for a time when things were less complicated and more tangible, or maybe it's just because old things are cool again. And that's our show. Find our latest stuff on YouTube and do subscribe to our channel. See you soon.